Hi there. This is Joel Green. I am Joel Greenberg, and this is Life in Stages, the podcast, season four. And just before I bring in this week's guest, I want to thank all of you who are listening and have been listening. Uh, and I'm going to be presumptuous and assume that you've been sharing this podcast and telling everybody you meet, all about it, because I do think it's unusual for artists to be asked and to agree to talk about themselves. This isn't promoting a particular project. This is not telling you where you can buy tickets for whatever that project is. It's really to get past the stage, I guess. And since actors, and that's largely the cohort that I've been talking to on Life in Stages, since actors spend their time being other people, I do think, at least in my experience, that actors are far too rarely asked to actually be themselves or talk about themselves. So that's my first point. The other is in thanking those of you who have been able and willing to support the podcast financially. This is a passion project. That's the label I was told I should use, and that's appropriate. Uh, and particularly want to thank Tim Ziegler of ZieglerWealth.com, ZIEGLER.com. Tim Ziegler was an actor, is now in the financial world, wealth management. And during season two, he heard episodes, contacted me. We'd never met. He said how much he enjoyed the podcast, how many of his clients, many of whom are artists, were on or were going to be on the podcast, and he thought we would be a good fit. So, Tim, continuing thanks for your support through season three and now through season four. Right. Thanks are now done. And I am welcoming Paul Essiembre to Life in Stages. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Joel.
Yeah. And Paul, I would like you to begin by telling us where in your life your interest and passion for performance, and I know you've done more than perform, but that's largely how I know you,
Yeah.
where this began.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Having grown up in New Brunswick in a small village
Hmm.
outside of a small town on the
Yes.
east coast near the water,
Hmm.
I didn't have a lot of exposure to performing arts when I was growing up as a young boy, young man. But I think I always kind of liked. I had an uncle who was a great influence on me, and he was a kind of jovial, always down on the floor playing with the kids, happy, jokey,
Hmm.
and there was that. I think I was drawn to that aspect of, oh, people really love him. A, because he's really kind, but also because he
Hmm.
really engages and he loves to make jokes and make people laugh. So I think
Hmm.
that kind of influenced me early on.
Hmm.
And then when I left home at 18, left high school, because again, even in high school, we didn't have a lot of opportunities to explore or try out
Hmm.
anything in the performing arts. We didn't have much of a theater club or anything at all. So I
Yeah.
kind of had a budding interest at that stage, but I didn't have the opportunity to explore it.
Right.
So it was when I left home at 18 with all my belongings in a suitcase and a garbage
Yes.
bag on an Air Canada flight, and I landed in Ottawa and did a year at Ottawa U, where
Uh-huh.
I kind of had three areas of interest. So I enrolled in a general arts program, and I
Hmm.
thought this is a great way to explore a few different avenues that are of interest to me. So I
Yeah.
took intro to theater, intro to political science, and intro to communication. So I was thinking
Okay.
performance, journalism, politics. Um, Ironically, ended up failing my intro to theater class, but that's a story for another
How
day.
do you do that?
Well, you just don't do the work.
I say, okay, well,
Yeah,
that's fair.
you don't
Sure.
submit the final project on time. That's how.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so yeah, I came out of high school. I graduated with honors. I had a certificate of merit. I
Hmm.
got two scholarships. And then my first year university. Out of my five classes, I dropped one, failed two, got a D and a B. So I said, okay, I think I better take some time off and figure
Hmm.
out who I am and what I want. So I did. I took a year off and worked for a year at various young person jobs in
Yeah.
Ottawa
Hmm.
and got involved In a theater production, I auditioned for and got the part in a theater production of, what's it called? Alone Together at the Ottawa Little Theatre. The Ottawa Little Theatre is an amateur theatre, but they put on full-scale productions. And that was my first time doing a full-length play.
Okay.
For more than one or two performances. And I think that's where the bug kind of bit me. And I said, oh, this is terrifying. Part of what was exciting was it was utterly terrifying to go out in front of a couple of hundred people every night and try to remember all of the things that you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to stand and how you're supposed to behave and what you're supposed to say at 19 or 20 years old, never having done it. But I think it was the terror of it that I kind of became addicted to. So then I applied to theater schools immediately after that and moved to Montreal and went to Dawson College, the Dome Theatre, did a 3-year professional theater program there.
Yeah.
And then off into the big bad world.
Yeah. So, in theater training, and I've had this conversation with many guests because all guests, all the guests who in particular are performers have had training of various kinds. Some in conservatory programs, some have learned it by doing, but mostly there is some aspect of training, and the recollections that people have are wildly different. I mean, some people had wonderful, really felt tremendously well supported with really strong collegial classmates, and there were others who didn't have that experience, who either who whether they were on the receiving end or they observed students being really the old broken down before they're built back up. So I'm wondering what your recollection is of having been in a 3-year program.
It was intense. It was all consuming. It was everything all the time, all year long. The program itself was okay. There were a couple of professors there, a couple of teachers and instructors that were really, really fantastic. And I kind of clung to them and absorbed as much knowledge and experience as I could from them and with them. And then there were some who were, on the more mediocre side, but that was fine. You could still learn some of the basics. It was intense. You talked about the bonding experiences with classmates, and I think 3 full years spending every hour of every day and evening with the same group of people when you're at that stage of development where every emotion is heightened and every experience is new. Inevitably, you're going to have some intense bonding experiences and some intense antagonistic experience as well. So, I had all of those. The program itself was interesting because it was a 3-year it was called a 3-year professional theater acting program. So acting was the focus, but because it was because of funding reasons, I guess, what we had to do is in our first year, second year, we had to crew the 3rd year shows.
Right.
And in 3rd year, we had to volunteer to crew the 1st and 2nd year shows.
Okay.
So over the course of 3 years, while your focus was on acting and you're doing all your acting classes, movement and voice and analysis and all the rest of it, you're also having to go to the theater and learn how to build costumes and learn how to do a lighting grid and hang and focus the lights and then run the lighting board for a show. And at the time, I remember all of us, to a person, we would just go, what the heck is this? I want to learn how to act. I don't want to learn how to hang lights or control sound. But in retrospect, it was an invaluable experience because it can only inform you more profoundly as a performer as to how to use all of these different elements that are around you to your advantage and how to collaborate and work with the other people that you're working with to produce this show. It was invaluable.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I went to what is now Concordia. At the time it was Sir George Williams. And it was quite, I think, very similar. It was a liberal arts program, and I was able to immerse myself in I wouldn't allow myself to take anything other than theater seriously. So I got through, but just accept theater. I mean, that was what I did. But I remember that also very clearly, having to be an ASM on one show, having to use power tools to do something in the shop. The one thing that I wouldn't do, because I was just terrified of heights, the theater, it was a gorgeous theater with a very, very high grid. And one of the areas that we were supposed to do was to be doing something up on the grid during a show. I said, I
Yeah.
can't do this. No, I know I should. I cannot do that. I mean, anyway, so I never did that.
Yeah.
I walked out on the grid once,
Yeah.
and that was it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is an invaluable knowledge for an actor, especially I think for an actor,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be aware of how how the project comes together.
How it all works,
Yeah,
how everything works, and
yeah,
how it works to support the performance, and how
that's
you
right.
can tweak your performance without losing any of your artistic integrity in order to help out one of the technical aspects.
That's
Like
right.
it's,
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was a different time too. So even
Yes.
I remember being on the sound crew, and we were working with rolls of tape, and I'd have to
Yes.
sit there with a razor blade slicing and splicing the tape together to
Oh,
get the
yes.
edit just right. And
Oh, directing shows until I guess until digital technology with sound in particular, well, lighting as well.
yeah,
You know, you could take you could be given 4 days to set the lights for a show.
that's
I
right.
thought with big shows, I remember the first experience I had with this designer saying, okay, move dimmer number 3, now dimmer number 76. Oh my
Yeah,
God, this is never going to end. I mean,
yeah,
this will never, ever end.
no,
And now it is, could you do that? Sure, done. And sound also, I have to
yeah,
you have to give me a few days to edit the tape.
that's
Now,
right.
like, what do you want? How's this?
That's
No?
right.
How's
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
It is it is quite amazing.
It's kind of a neat thing to be at the stage of life where I can think back to that experience
Hmm.
36 years ago,
Yeah,
and how much the world has changed.
yeah,
It's an experience that no one will have again.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
they may have the experience of learning how to crew a show and to do
yeah,
various things with
hmm,
costumes or stage management or
yeah.
whatever, but some of the analog elements of it are just
Oh, I agree. I agree. I should never have been between power tools and sewing machines. I It was clear that was not going to be a path that I anybody should have let me near.
yeah,
Okay, so you've done the program,
yeah.
and then how do you like, what is your experience moving from that into the profession? How how does that transition work?
I've had such great good fortune in my
Hmm.
career. Amidst all of the frustrations and the losses and the struggles, I
Hmm.
also recognize that I have had an incredibly great good fortune at many, many stages. So
Hmm.
when I was in my final year of theater school, one of our instructors, his spouse, was also a voice director in Montreal.
Hmm.
And in Montreal at the time, there was a lot of dubbing going on. There still is, but at that
Hmm.
time, it was kind of at its height, I think. So, final year of theater school,
Yeah.
the spouse of this theater teacher invited me to come in. So I started doing some dubbing. I started doing some voice work, and so I
Hmm.
started working in the last few months of my final year. And
Okay.
eventually, that's how I ended up getting my actor card, was by getting enough credits doing dubbing work, which was
Okay.
great.
Hmm.
And then, fresh out of theater school, I booked a Shakespeare in the Park with Repercussion Theater, which is I think it's still ongoing.
Hmm.
But it was a common launching pad for many, many Montreal performers.
Yeah.
So I did that, and
Hmm.
then I booked my first main stage equity show with Theatre New Brunswick in the fall of that year,
Okay.
and that was The Winter's Tale.
Hmm.
I had no idea. I had no idea what I was getting into and how fortunate I was until after I did. So The Winter's Tale, Theatre in New Brunswick, this is when it was still a functioning regional theatre, and they would tour the
Right.
province, and it would bring in performers from all over. So who am I performing with? This young green theatre professional.
Yeah.
Douglas Campbell, Ben Campbell, Terry Tweed, Sarah Ornstein, John Jarvis. It was just Stuart Arnott. It was a who's who
Yeah.
of Canadian theatre at that time. And I had no idea. Here I was, this wide-eyed, bushy-tailed kind of like, oh, isn't this fun? This is so much fun. So the point is, I got very lucky. Fresh out of theater school, I started working right away.
Right.
And then I continued working for the next year and a bit in small local projects and theater things, and not necessarily making much of a living, but working.
Right. Yeah.
Then I auditioned for and was invited to go to Stratford as a young apprentice. This is before the Langham, the academy that they have now. It was an apprenticeship program where you go through being an apprentice and then a journeyman, and then. So I did that for 2 years. So for almost 4 years, right out of theater school, I worked consistently in the theater, and so that was one of the first moments of great good fortune that I had, was that I launched and I started to work right away, which is great. But then when I left Stratford in '95 and went to Toronto, that's when I experienced the first kind of stages of, oh, I'm not working anymore. Yeah, so it was lucky.
Toronto does that.
Yeah,
It seems. I don't know anybody. Yeah, it's I've never quite understood it. I mean, I'm from Montreal originally, but I moved from Montreal to Toronto right after I finished university, realizing I don't know why it took me that long to realize there really wasn't going to be a career for me as an Anglophone in Montreal. And by then, even though I thought I was going to be an actor, but I already knew that I was much more interested in directing than I was in performing. And certainly as a director, I said, well, at the time there was one theater, like one English speaking theater.
Yeah.
So I came to Toronto, but Toronto is, it's not it's not famous for opening its arms and embracing, right?
No, it could be brutal. And my first year and a half, I worked consistently out of theater school for almost 4 years, landed in Toronto and didn't book a thing for a year. Wow. And that was the first time that I was looking at kind of day jobs and supplementary things. I was doing valet parking and busing in restaurants and working in collections for phone companies and all kinds of not fun things.
Yeah.
Yeah, Toronto. I think it's Toronto, though, because it was, and probably still is, it's the largest cultural center that we have in terms of volume of work and volume of opportunities. So I think many of us from other parts of the country end up in Toronto because we think, well, that's where the opportunities are.
Yeah.
And I remember an interesting experience in Toronto too, where if I would book something in another city, if I'd book something, in Ottawa or Montreal or wherever, the local actors would always go, you Toronto actors coming and taking away all our jobs. And I go, none of us are from Toronto, right? We all came to Toronto from somewhere else in Canada. But
well, I remember the first time that I worked in Montreal after I left Montreal in '71. I worked in Montreal for the first time. It was '97 or '98, something like that. It was a long time. And I was really excited to have the opportunity to work, where I grew up.
Yeah.
And the woman who was the theater critic for, I guess for the Gazette, interviewed me, and her opening salvo was, "Oh, another Montrealer who ran away." And I said, "Hold on a second." I said, "You know what?" I said, "You happen to have a daughter who's an actor living in Ontario.
Yeah.
And why am I being blamed for wanting to work?"
Yeah.
Because, it took me 27 years to get back here. So one show every 27 years, isn't quite enough.
No.
But that attitude, you're right. I mean, I felt that, I've worked a fair amount, I used to work much more across the country. The only place where I never had that response was in Winnipeg. And I know that you're in Winnipeg now, right? Yeah. It was the only place. I remember the first time I worked there, I guess it was '90 or '91, and I wrote to the couple, the few theaters that were there, and I said, I'll be coming, and it would be very nice to meet you. And I was so used to, in Toronto, doing that kind of thing and saying, I don't know why I'm bothering. I mean, it's not even worth the price of a stamp, let alone a phone. Nobody returns phone calls. And all of those people, even though I didn't get any work out of it, but everybody said, "Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We know you're coming." I said, "How do you know it?" So it was a very, very different reception than I'd had probably everywhere else that I worked in the country.
Yeah. And I think that landscape has shifted too. I'm talking about, this is, it was the '90s, that I'm experiencing these things. And back then, as I made mention with Theatre New Brunswick, back then the regional theatres were regional theatres. And
that's right.
They did bring in a lot of performers from Toronto, much to the chagrin of the local performing group of people. But I think that has really shifted now too. It used to be that you could be a performer based out of Toronto, theater performer based out of Toronto, and you could have opportunities to work across the country. And I really don't think that exists very much anymore.
No,
A, because of finances, but B, because cities like Winnipeg and Edmonton have nurtured their communities, and they've grown both in size and in capability, and so they can fill most of their casting with the local talent, which is fantastic for that city. So
certainly.
again, experiences that you and I kind of shared that are generational from another time that just don't exist anymore in the same way.
No, they don't. You're absolutely right. So the other piece of your career that is somewhat unique from the guess is that you're bilingual.
Yes.
And you have worked in French a lot.
I have.
Right? So how do you it's not even a matter of juggling, but what is it like working in one language and working then in another? Or is it simply the work is the same? I know that the culture, certainly Quebecois culture, is totally different. And the few people I know who I've had a chance to work with who have worked in Quebecois theater, the processes are like it really is two solitudes in
Yeah. So it's interesting talking about the French piece for me, because I grew up in New Brunswick, so fluently bilingual my whole life, but my native tongue is French. My mother tongue is French.
Okay.
But it's Acadian French, which aside from the French theater culture, which operates very differently than the English theater culture, there's also a thing in French culture generally where there's a kind of a snobbiness and snootiness about the language. So, people from Quebec will look down on people from New Brunswick's French, and people from France will look down on people from Quebec's French. Like there's a hierarchy of which French is real French.
Yeah.
So I had some of that self-awareness, and so I was never very confident working in French because I had my training in English, even though I was born and raised in French and went to French schools my whole life in New Brunswick. Then I went to theater school in English, and so that was the foundation for me was English theater and English theater structure and English theater principles and approach. So my first few times working in French theater was with Théâtre Français in Toronto. Which was fantastic. Guy Mignot was the artistic director at the time. He was such a lovely man. And I really had to overcome a lot of my my self-deprecating shyness about the quality of my French. And they were very encouraging and supportive of that. So that was the first thing I had to overcome was my self-deprecating self-awareness of what my French sounded like. Juggling, switching between, it was never really an issue because you're doing it in one language at that time. You're either in French or you're in English. And my early experiences working in French were in Toronto, so they were still very closely, the approach was still closely related to the approach that I knew for theater, which was text-based. And my first kind of shock in that respect was doing a show at Stratford. We did Don Juan. And Lorraine Pintal from Théâtre du Nouveau Monde was invited to come and direct it. And she directed us in English first at Stratford. And we played it in English at the Avon Theatre. And while we were performing in English, we would then start to rehearse it in French so that we would do the final 2 weeks of the season. Performances would be in French.
Okay.
That was a juggling challenge because you've got different words but the same meaning in your head at the same time as you're performing in one and rehearsing in the other, but it's the same scene and it's the same blocking, and that was a real mindfuck. And then after that production closed at Stratford, that winter, we took the show to Théâtre du Nouveau Monde in Montreal. So that was my first experience working in Montreal theater, Quebecois theater. And that was a culture shock because they replaced a few of the lead roles, and a few of the other characters were replaced with Montreal actors who were Francophone. And their approach was really different. Like the English theater approach really is text-based, and you start with the text and everything is related to the text. This is all going back to Shakespeare. And in French, it was more about an emotion and a feeling and a physicality. And that's what you start with. And then you make the text fit into whatever it is that you think you're feeling or emoting or wanting to, whatever physicality you want to convey to the audience. So that was a bit of a culture shock. but a fascinating experience,
Yeah.
and great. It's just great to be doing something different and
Yeah.
learning from different people who have a different approach and a different
Yeah.
worldview. It was really
Hmm.
neat. Yeah.
Did you have more opportunities to work in Montreal in French?
No,
Okay.
no. I had a couple of film and TV auditions that went to second and third rounds for like an occasional series while I was based in Toronto. And I
Hmm.
just remember if I would get to like a final round of casting, I remember being in a room one time, it was like my second or third audition, and they brought me to Montreal for one of the callbacks. And I did the scene, and the producers and casting directors are all sitting there looking at you very studiously, very kind of like analytically, kind of, you can see them thinking, but you have no idea what they're thinking. And as an actor, you try not to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, they hate me, they hate me. No, they
Yeah.
don't hate you. They're just trying to figure things out. And then one of them looked at me and she said, "You're not from Montreal, are you?" I said, "No." She said, "Yeah, I could tell. You have an accent. There's an accent in there that I can't quite pinpoint." And I'm like, "Yeah." So that harkens back to that French hierarchical kind of like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
you have to sound like this
Yeah.
particular thing
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't quite work.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned television and film. You've done a lot of television and film. How was that an easy entry for you?
No. Oh,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Again, with a foundation in theater and
Yeah.
English classical theater,
Hmm.
3 years of theater school, and then a couple of seasons at Stratford as an apprentice and journeyman. Like my whole foundation as an actor was based in the English classical theater system.
Okay.
Film and TV, as we all know, is it's just a very different beast, and
Hmm.
you have to tap into different skills. You can use the same, you can have some of the same approach in terms of textual analysis, character building, choice making, and all of that. But with
Hmm.
the physicality and the emotive expressions have to be incredibly different. So no, it wasn't an
Hmm.
easy transition. I started very small with small roles, tiny one-day parts with one or two lines,
Hmm.
and would just watch and watch and absorb as much as I could because it was a fascinating medium. And very foreign to me because, again, with the classical theater training, we didn't get film and TV training. So
Right.
my film and TV training was all kind of on the job
Right.
and learning from the people that I had opportunities to work with and
Hmm.
watch and observe. And I
Yeah.
remember an experience I had. It's kind of like where the penny drops. An
Hmm.
experience where I was doing. It was a nice little small part. I had like 2 or 3 scenes in an episodic, and the lead actor had this monologue where he had to burst into my office and tear a strip off me and just like basically launch into me. And I'm
Hmm.
sitting there at my desk, and the actor walks in and he can't get through his lines, and he's screwing it up, and he's starting again, and he's stopping mid sentence, and he calls for line. It went on like this for about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
Where it wasn't a huge monologue, but it was a bit of it was a chunk, and he just couldn't get through it. And when he'd say things, it just looked like he was so bored. He was so bored with himself. He was so bored with the process. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking, my God, this guy is awful. This is
Hmm.
going to look terrible. And then I watched it on TV, and
Hmm.
he was fantastic. He was fantastic, and I was over the top. So you have those moments where you just kind of, if you can go back and watch it and self-analyze without being overly critical, but just kind of,
Yeah.
oh, what's
Yeah.
the difference? What do I need to learn? How can I shift this? How can I make that different? What did he
Hmm.
do that made that moment work? Because
Hmm.
in the room,
Yeah. Yeah.
it just looked like he was vacant,
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah, there are many stories, many of them are obviously true. I mean, like yours, is I think was it may have been Marilyn Monroe. I think it was Monroe who, by whatever I read, that in the filming, people couldn't quite understand like what the fascination was until
Yeah,
they saw what the camera saw in her or
yeah,
whatever that chemistry.
yeah, yeah,
And no, and I've acted on TV twice, like really ages and ages and ages ago, and both times, well, the first one in particular, watching for about 5 minutes, and thinking, why didn't somebody should have helped me
yeah,
to just say what you're doing is awful. It's like you don't want to say, "Can you do it any bigger?" Because the fear is that I'd say, "Oh, of course I can."
Yeah,
Anyway, it's just yeah, and I think also, I mean, I don't know how different. I would assume now that schools actually do camera technique or experience where students get the experience of knowing what it's like
I would
to
think
act for
so.
a camera.
Yeah, yeah. I'm out of touch with the academic
Yeah,
worlds and the
yeah,
theater training worlds, but I would think so because
yeah. Well, we've worked together a few times, and it's always been terrific.
I
Uh,
agree.
and I know that when we were doing, I forget which play it was, but it was something. At some point, I offered you something, and you told me that you were about to move from Toronto to Winnipeg. Um,
I
and I
remember it.
understood. I certainly understood that. It was difficult, and I think there was an. I think if I'm remembering this accurately, I think there was an attempt on my part to find a way of bringing you here, to not letting, to not having the move somehow, you know, eh, terminating your Toronto career, but it
Yeah,
didn't work out.
yeah.
So can you talk about the move and either what prompted it or what it's been like? Because was that 10 years ago? As
13, my friend.
Wow, wow,
Yep.
okay, okay.
I know. Time
Mm, wow.
flies. Yep. I'm having a birthday next week, and I'm just shaking my head, going, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
Yeah, the move. I remember that very clearly because it was a big moment. It was a
Of
big
course.
moment in my personal life.
Hmm.
I want to say too, and this is not through a very lengthy and very fortunate career.
Hmm.
There, you do a lot of projects where you just kind of go, that was fine. It was work. I get to
Hmm.
practice my trade. I got to apply my trade. I got to apply my craft and learn something new or try something different or whatever. There are only handfuls, small handfuls of projects that really stand out as
Hmm.
meaningful or significant artistically or personally. And I have to say this, every single one of the shows I worked on with you,
Uh-huh.
Studio 180, there were three of them, and every
Hmm.
single one of them, they're in my top 10 experiences of all
Oh,
time. Like, they were just fantastic.
oh, that's
But I remember
nice.
the time you're talking about. We were
Hmm.
doing The Normal Heart.
Hmm.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah,
Oh, what a production.
yeah.
Like, that was one of those productions where you go, this is just, it's moving an audience in such a powerful way.
Hmm.
I've never been one that thinks theater has to change the world.
Hmm.
I think theater just has to move people. You
Hmm.
just have to move them to laughter or move them to tears or move them
Yeah.
to consider things, whatever.
Hmm.
And I remember that experience as one of the, if not the most emotionally powerful experiences in the theater as a
Yeah,
performer that I've ever
yeah.
had. And yes, we were looking at moving because what happened? So in 2006, I went back to Stratford for a couple of seasons and with my wife, Erin, and
Hmm.
our daughter, Amélie, was born there. And we lived there. I did 2 more seasons at Stratford, but then we stayed living in Stratford because we just liked living there. It was a beautiful
Yeah,
place to live and raise a
yeah,
child. But then when I wasn't working at the festival, I was always on the highway to Toronto.
yeah.
And it's ostensibly a 2-hour drive, but it's never a 2-hour drive.
Right, right.
And I think after 3 years of doing that day in and day out, and at the
Yeah.
time I was doing a lot of voice work. So it was
Hmm.
just in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. If I was doing theater, I would rent a room and I would stay in town for the week and come home on the weekends.
Hmm.
I think it was after 3 years of doing that, the day that I spent 8 hours in a car for a 30-second voice audition.
Oh,
And I said,
God.
I don't think I can do this anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember we didn't really want to go back into the big city, nor could we really afford to in Toronto.
Hmm.
So we kind of took a map and drew a 1-hour circle around Toronto, and we looked at everything from Oshawa to Hamilton
Hmm.
and settled on Guelph. Guelph
Hmm.
seemed like a nice little town that wasn't just a bedroom community. It was its
Yeah.
own entity. It was
Hmm.
progressive. It seemed like a lovely place to live. We had friends who lived there. They loved it. So we tried Guelph for a couple of years. And Aaron, who is eminently employable with many degrees and lots of work experience, it was just a time where nobody was hiring in the fields where she has an expertise.
Hmm.
So she was having a hard time getting work, and I was still commuting to Toronto. And at the time, there was a population boom in and around Milton, so it was still taking me 2-3 hours in and
Yeah.
out each way.
Yeah.
So after 2 years of that, we said, well, this isn't working. What are we going to do? And we said, well, we still don't really want to go back to Toronto. And so I threw out as a last resort, well, what about Winnipeg? Because she's from Winnipeg. Her family is here.
Okay. Okay.
Neither of us had that on our radar. We never thought we'd be looking at Winnipeg as a place to live. But we took step by step of exploration. We looked at the real estate. She came and met with a bunch of potential employers. Then I came and met with all the theater and film people here. And we kind of said, this is a place that could work for us. So we decided we would do it. And we were doing The Normal Heart.
Right.
Or we decided in February. Then The Normal Heart, I think, was more towards the end of the year. In the spring, I don't remember. Anyway, I do remember that, and then there was going to be a remount of it.
That's right.
So I did the first part of it, and the remount was going to be the following fall.
That's
but
right.
I happened to book a lead role in a show that was a co-production between MTC and Citadel, and this was going to be my new place of residence.
Sure.
So I was like, continue this amazing, incredible, artistic, emotional journey with my friends in Toronto, or play this really significant lead role in another play in the new place I'm going to be. So that was, it was a dilemma, and it broke my heart to have to give up The Normal Heart. But then the other one ended up being a fantastic experience in its own right.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, so how is Winnipeg as your home?
Winnipeg is great. It's been great for us as a family to have our daughter grow up near grandparents and cousins. And she's had a really great, she's in second year of university now here at U of M.
God.
Yep. So she's had a great kind of upbringing and a great stable home life and lots of love and support around her. Erin has a great career as a guidance counselor in elementary schools. And she's been doing that since we landed 13 years ago.
Okay.
And I have, well, up until fairly recently, really had continued streaks of great good fortune. There was a period of time where I was doing a lot of theater and a lot of co-productions between mostly MTC and Mirvish, or MTC and Citadel. And then in the last 5, 6, 7 years, Winnipeg has really had a bit of a boom in terms of all of the Hallmark movies and the Hollywood features and a couple of TV series. So I was very fortunate to be able to take advantage of a lot of that for a bunch of years too.
Yeah.
So overall, Winnipeg's been great. It's been a great place to live and have a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And work has been in and out.
Okay.
Generally okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what you're doing now?
What I'm doing now. So the work being okay, in and out, in and out.
Okay.
You think you reach a point. You think you'd reach a point where you don't have to jump through all the hoops, and you don't have to keep running after the jobs that are less interesting. But that never really happens for most of us as Canadian performers.
Yeah.
So with all of the great years that I've had here, last year was a particularly not great year. And so I was forced to kind of keep my eyes and ears open for other opportunities. And I'd been doing that for a few years anyway, just as wanting to broaden my horizons and have different experiences. And so I went through different stages where I did a little directing, I did some writing, I did a bunch of things, but all still connected to the world of performance. And so this opportunity came along last summer that floated in front of me, and I looked at it and I kind of thought, oh, well, there's something that could be interesting. And it was to work as a communications advisor for a federal MP. So I applied, I went through the stages, and then they offered me the job. So I've been doing that since September.
Okay.
So I'm 5 months into, for the first time in my life, a full-time 9-to-5 job. And it is a shock to the system. For someone who's used to having a little more control over their schedule when they're not working, it's a shock to the system for sure.
Yeah.
But it's been really fascinating too. It's a whole different world.
Sure.
It's a whole different way of working. I'm using different brain muscles, different body muscles, different. It's interesting. It's just an interesting experience to jump into.
Yeah, and again with several of our colleagues. It's not an unusual story.
No.
And in fact, there have been several people this season. I don't know why this season more than in previous seasons, but several people this season have talked about what it's like to get older as a performer.
Hmm.
And often the comments have been, and these are people with like your resume is huge, and people who have done a tremendous amount of work,
Yeah.
saying, I don't think anybody even knows that I was ever here.
No.
You know, and I remember asking an actor earlier on in the season, um, said, are there roles that you haven't yet done, or a role you might have done that you are now really ready to do? And his answer was, well, yeah, he said, I have done, said I did Lear when I was much too young. And that, he said, that's something I think would be terrific for me to do now. He said, but that'll never happen. I mean,
Hmm.
nobody cares, and
Hmm.
nobody's about to come to me. And uh, I am not immune. Like none of us is immune, right?
No.
So, it's not, and none of it is said in a self-pitying
No,
way
no.
at all. It's
No,
just,
no, no.
and I
Just the
don't know if this
reality
is,
of what it is.
yeah, and I don't know if this is, it might just be generational. And since this is where, this is where my generation is now,
Yeah.
maybe it happens, to every generation. In one of the conversations that has also been um, fairly frequent is for people who have taught, um, and particularly people who, yeah, have taught or done workshops saying that they feel that the youngsters that they deal with, young professionals or aspiring professionals, don't really know in large number, have no idea who came before them.
No.
And the numbing thing is that most of them don't actually seem to care. If you say you really here's somebody whose work you should know, or these are names you want to know who these people were. When I was teaching, I stopped teaching at Waterloo around 2014,
Hmm.
and the students were always terrific. But I had noticed now some of it was I said I'm getting older and they're not. The student cohort stays pretty much the same. But I was getting I was getting really tired of saying things like, here's somebody, or when I was teaching film, say, let's talk about the 60s, because that without the 60s, the movies that you're going to be studying, you're not going to, it's not
Hmm.
going
There's
to
no
have the
context.
weight that, yeah. I said, so who can tell me when and what is seminal in the 60s? And you're saying, anybody? And this is for classes of 50 and 60 people. Is it anybody at all? You want to
Nope.
just guess? So, nope. Um, And so I mean, it's disheartening for sure, and it's hard. I mean, it's really, really hard to feel. I don't know if this is a fair way of saying it, but to feel that something has been taken away.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's a fascinating journey. I mean, just thinking back on everything that you've just said about the
yeah,
generational thing. I mean, I can think of myself as a young performing actor and having people say, well, you really should know about what came before, and I had that attitude too of like, who
hmm
cares, it's what
hmm
comes next that's
yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah.
And in a way
As
that applies to our careers as performers too, is you're
hmm
only as good as your last audition.
hmm yeah,
This is the famous saying of the five stages of being an actor.
hmm
There's kind of a romance that people have, a perception people have of what it's like to be a professional actor, where they go,
hmm
"Oh my God, what an interesting life," and
mm,
you've
mm,
worked a lot, so you must have like
yeah,
you must have savings in the bank account, and you must have like a reputation, and you must have. Well, maybe not so
yeah,
much.
yeah,
But it
yeah.
calls to mind that the five stages of being an actor, right?
hmm
First stage being, who's Paul Essiembre?
hmm
The second stage is, well, let's try Paul Essiembre. Third stage is, get me Paul Essiembre. Fourth being, get me somebody like Paul Essiembre. And then the fifth stage is, who is Paul Essiembre?
mm,
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah,
It's a wonderful life and it's a hard life.
yeah, Yeah.
It is wonderful. Like it's not. Would never want to just sit here and bemoan my outcast state and how the
Yes.
struggles. The struggles are many. They really, truly are.
Yeah.
But so are the wonderful connections that you make and the wonderful
Yeah.
joy that you can bring people. Like
Yeah.
that's
No, I agree. I mean, when you made reference to the Normal Heart, which is among, certainly among the plays that I cherish, having had the opportunity to work on,
yeah,
and the company, everything about it was, I couldn't imagine it having been any more satisfying, any more enriching.
yeah.
And I'm saying this for a reason, but I don't know where I'm going with this. So
The
why don't you
joy and the
start?
struggles. The
Yeah, yeah. So when we did that, yes, we did that, and God knows nobody was like everybody was paid what was required,
yeah,
but God knows. And I remember at Buddy's, I remember the dressing room only too well.
yeah.
So here's a play with all of these men. So Sarah got to be somewhere by herself.
Oh no, she was in the
And
same room with
oh,
us.
was she? Okay, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was, yeah.
She had a curtain off to the side.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the actors, I won't name him, but one of the actors saying he had just gone out to buy new underwear because he was so embarrassed by the underwear he was wearing. He said, I like everybody looks so good in their underwear. Uh, so that was I remember the Normal Heart very well.
Yeah.
And that it was about, these cliches are, I don't know if they're cliches, but the expressions are, it was really only about the work, right? Yes, we all got paid,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Not enough to
and
make a living in Toronto.
oh my God, no,
Theater
no, no,
wages are
no,
not enough to
yeah,
make a living in
no.
Toronto.
And now I don't know. I mean, Toronto is just, it's always been an expensive city,
Hmm.
and it has become, um, when there are reports saying, sales are down or real estate is down, it's maybe down, but not, it's not really, I mean,
No.
it's all relative,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
yep. Okay. Um, a question, I mean, another question. I mean, you talk about your family,
Yeah.
and are you somebody who is good at separating, like giving yourself the personal world that you need rather than, I'd say, like I'm now projecting where I've never been very good at seeing my personal and private life as separate entities, sort of like one mushed thing, which occasionally, probably more often than it should have, where the professional has definitely overtaken the personal
Hmm.
family stuff.
Hmm.
I don't know what that's like for you.
Well, it's tricky because as a performer, when you get the work,
Hmm.
when the call comes, you have to go.
Hmm.
And you don't often have control over when that's going to be or how long it's going to be. If
Yeah.
it's in film and
Hmm.
TV, it could be the next 5 days till 6 in the morning. Or if it's
Hmm.
theater, it can be out of town for 2 months at a go. It can,
Right. Hmm.
so that's always been a challenge. I think, I think in my early years, in my 20s, as a
Yeah.
young theater professional, and I think this is true for most of us, you live, eat, and breathe theater. It is
Hmm.
everything. Most of
Yeah.
your friends are in the world of theater, and
Hmm.
if you're dating people and having relationships, it's usually within the world of theater. It's a very kind of insular. That's everything.
Hmm.
It is everything. So there is no separation between personal and professional. I think the first time that shifted for me was when my eldest daughter was born, when I was 26, and I suddenly had a whole other reason to live and
Hmm.
put focus into something other than this primary passion of mine. I now had another passion,
Hmm.
this little human being that needed my care and attention.
Hmm.
So that was the first kind of shift where I realized that there could be two different parts of me.
Yeah.
Of course, there's overlap,
Hmm.
but that the professional, that is one thing. The career,
Yeah.
that is one thing. The artistic fulfillment, that is over here in this world.
Hmm.
And there can also be a whole other aspect to your life that's not related to that whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then over time, as my family grew, Aaron and I got together, and we had our daughter, and it just the family life, the separate life, became its own thing. I couldn't have kept working in the theater and in film and TV had it not been for Aaron's acceptance of what the career is. I think you need a partner or a spouse who really does understand, okay, now they're going to be gone for 2 months. And then when they're back, they'll be back.
Yeah.
And then on my part, when I'm back, I have to be fully back.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the only way it can work there.
Yeah, no, you're right. When I know that I was not good at coming back and immediately being back in the family.
Yeah.
I mean, I came back and I needed time.
Yeah.
Fairly selfish.
Yeah.
Since Phyllis had been running everything in my absence.
Yeah.
And you're right, it would be for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
It was never. It was never just a couple of days.
No.
It was. And even when I was working, most of my work was in Toronto. It sort of didn't matter. I was equally absent. It's just that being out of town, I think, for both of us was probably a lot easier because there was no expectation that I would eventually come home where I might be seen in the morning on my way out the door.
Right. I think in that regard too, like when we were living in Toronto and I'd be doing a theater show in Toronto, there was definitely a period of time after the production would close. It would depend on the production. It would depend on the production and the character and the emotional intensity that was required.
Sure.
The intention, the emotional commitment that was required for that particular role or play or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if it is a pretty either traumatic or emotionally loaded journey to go through night after night after night, 8 times a week, it's going to take a few weeks to kind of let that recede into the recesses of your psyche and to kind of feel like yourself again, reclaim yourself after you've immersed yourself in an emotional experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's common too.
Yeah.
And even, as from a director's perspective, I mean, especially working on the kinds of shows that you love to work on, they're very demanding.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, I remember doing The Overwhelming, and like that one took me 3 or 4 weeks after we closed to kind of come out of the darkness and into the light again.
Yeah, no, that's certainly true. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you had done some directing, and I do remember. I think shortly after you moved, we had a conversation. You were asking if there was a play that I could suggest or something that you were doing. So, what directing have you done, and has that been, has it been satisfying for you to be, as they say, on the other side?
I'm not a lot of opportunities. I would have enjoyed having more, but they were just difficult to come by mid-career. So I had a couple of opportunities. I really did enjoy it. I think I was at a stage when I started doing it. I was at a stage of my personal life and my career where what I found enjoyable was expanding the worldview of a project. Of an artistic project, as opposed to just kind of focusing on one aspect, one character, and where they fit in the story and how they can contribute to the telling of the story.
Sure.
I really enjoyed looking at the overall view and getting a sense of how to communicate a bigger message through all of the different aspects of the performance, whether it be performances or lighting or set or whatever. Like I really did enjoy that because it was more challenging. There were different components. But I just didn't it was just hard to get opportunities mid-career at that point in time. So
And what you talk a little bit? Tell us about the Winnipeg sort of the theater scene or the cultural scene more widely. So I worked in Winnipeg, but it was early '90s. So certainly the theater center was there, obviously, and Leslie Silverman's. Manitoba Theatre for Young People, if that's the right name.
Yep, MTYP.
Yeah, those were the 2 theaters that I'm familiar with that were there when I was there. But what is that scene like?
It's an incredibly vibrant scene here in Winnipeg, and I mean has been for as long as I've been here. When I landed, Well, the two of the biggest theaters, so PTE, Prairie Theatre
Oh,
Exchange,
right,
and
of course.
Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, the
Hmm.
two kind of larger theaters
Yeah.
here,
Hmm.
had artistic directors at the time who had been around for a long, long time
Hmm.
and who did great at running their theaters and were very
Hmm.
successful. And they both, 5 or 6 years after I landed, they both kind of moved on, and new blood kind of came in. And so I think the new blood kind of gave a resurgence to the energy that was here within the local community. I think what we touched on before about how over the past 20 years or so, local theatre communities in some of our other Canadian cities like Winnipeg have had a chance to grow and be nourished and flourish. So it's an incredibly vibrant theatre scene here, strong independent theatre scene as well.
Yeah.
Winnipeg is always one of the first things I learned about Winnipeg when I landed here was because it's got, we've got the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, we've got the Royal Ballet, we've got the Symphony, we've got an incredible indie music scene, and there's just a lot of art and culture in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And I said, that's so weird. And even film and TV. Winnipeg traditionally hits above its weight class in terms of the kind of film and TV projects that are done here and the volume of them, like more than other cities of a comparable size.
Right.
And it was always interesting to me. I kind of wondered why that was, that Winnipeg was such a culturally vibrant place. And a theory was put forward to me that I think absolutely rings true, is that Winnipeg is one of the few cities that is, like most other North American cities, are within 6 hours drive of another city. And Winnipeg is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the exception of perhaps Regina or Saskatoon. But there's just not a lot of other culture to go to. So Winnipeggers long ago learned to create their own
Yeah.
and nurture their own. And so it's a neat thing about Winnipeg.
Yeah.
But theater, for me, I don't think I'm done with theater, and I don't think theater's done with me. But
Yeah.
the last show I did was at the very beginning of COVID. It was As You Like It, co-pro with MTC and Citadel. We were in Edmonton performing when COVID hit. And
I see.
remember that week when, the NHL started canceling games and NBA started canceling games. And you go, when the professional sports leagues are canceling games, something's going on.
Yeah.
So that was the last show I did for live theater. So I made a deliberate choice to kind of step away for the last 5 or 6 years, partly because I had many more opportunities in film and TV, and now I have this other opportunity with my other job that I'm exploring, and I'm still doing some voice work on the side.
Okay.
So the reason I'm saying all of this is to come back to your original question of what's the theater scene like here in Winnipeg, and I have to confess that in the last 5 years, I've not been a big part of it. I've kind of kept my ears and eyes open and watched and seen things, but from what I see, it's what it's always been for as long as I've been here, which is vibrant and thriving.
Yeah. I remember a friend of mine who was in Chicago when I was working in Winnipeg. I mentioned what an amazing city it is. And he said, because he said it's the Midwest. He said, Chicago, which is a lot closer to other places. He said, but it's the same sensibility. He said,
Right.
We don't need anybody to tell us what to do.
Right.
We know, and we'll take it on, and we'll find a way of doing it.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was so struck by the projects that, certainly the two projects that I did I said, these would never have been, like, no company in Toronto would have done these.
No.
It wasn't that they weren't outlandish. They were just both really good. And there wouldn't have been a Toronto company interested.
Right.
And in the first one, the woman who ran the company at the time she said, you really should consider moving here. I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I said, I do have this family, you see, and they're fine. They're very happy where they are. And I know that part of Winnipeg's, it may be a continuing history, was that people tended to leave. And I think for that very reason, that it is so far. And yet, whether people are still leaving or not, the vibrancy hasn't been, compromised.
No. And I have had an opportunity over the last several years to have conversations with some of the younger theater performers who, they would approach me and kind of say, hey, like, you've been to different places and you've had different experiences, and I'm young and eager, and I want to make my living in the theater, and what would you recommend, and what, should I stay, should I go? And a lot of them are making the choice to stay.
Yeah.
Some of them, if there's an opportunity for them, or some of them will go to Vancouver or Toronto and sit for 6 months or 12 months and try for a little while and see if they can make some opportunities happen for themselves there. But a lot of people are staying by choice because they say, no, I really like living here. My family's here. This is where I love to be. And there is work, and I will continue. And where there isn't work, I will make work happen.
That's great. Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Paul, this has been I've so enjoyed having a chance to talk to you.
As have I.
It's been a long time, and I know we've had a couple of opportunities to talk in the past, but certainly nothing like this.
Yeah.
And that's part of the pleasure of the podcast format. There's no rush. Thank you. Thank you, and all the very best in everything, wherever you go.
Thank you, Joel.
Whatever you find.
It's been such a real pleasure, and I have to say that I've enjoyed listening to your podcast as well. I've listened to great big chunks of it, and I enjoy hearing your chats with a lot of my former friends and colleagues. Well, still friends, but people I used to be more in touch with. Yeah,
and to everybody else who's listening, I thank you. I thank you because that gives the podcast the support that it needs, and I really want to. I'm encouraging you to share this conversation with everybody. It's yet another example of getting to know an artist away from and as part of his work. To those who have been able to or would like to consider supporting the podcast financially, well, that's always much appreciated, as this is a self-funded passion project. And it's easy enough to do. It's easy for me to say, but here's how you can do it if you are of a mind to. In Canada, you would e-transfer Jerica Life in Stages, JERICA Life in Stages at Rogers.com. And outside of Canada, you would go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Life in Stages. The instructions there are very clear. Thank you all again. Thank you, ZieglerWealth.com, and thank you, Paul Essiembre.
Thanks, Joel.
Bye-bye.